Hey guys. Man, everything's still in a mess behind me. I got all the parts for building my new computer in the mail so far, and my friend got Zerker. He's familiar to you guys who come to my live streams and everything like that. I talk to him all the time. He started out as a online friend, and then we found out he only lives a couple hours away, so he comes down and hangs out with us sometimes, and he's gonna come down and make my computer, but then I got sick again. I think it's just a regular cold this time. The kids and Matthew were feeling kind of crummy like a week ago, and then what is today? Wednesday, I thought it was allergies were going nuts, and the sinus drainage was insane. And then that night, I had a horrible night because my throat, the mucus kept going into my throat and hardening, becoming like compacted phlegm. And so I'd wake up going, and then yesterday I was just, oh man, I felt very feverish. I never measured more than 99, which is weird because I felt way worse than that, but it's just very weak, and yeah, it's just hard to get anything done. And I'm kind of sad because yesterday and today are the first days this week that I don't have any other really important appointments scheduled. So I was going to spend it, getting the computer made and, my nose. Being sick is so fun. Just like, working on the website, just trying to knock off my to-do list. But then I got hit with this sickness, and oh my freaking nose. I feel better today than yesterday, but that's not saying too much because I was pretty out of it yesterday. Basically, all I did was lay down and I played a little bit of Days Gone, but like I couldn't even concentrate on the game, so then I went and lay down again. And then when Matthew got home, he made spaghetti and meatballs and vegetables and stuff, which I appreciate because I was not up to cooking. Fucking nose. Yeah, so anyway, it's just, I'm gonna get some laundry done today, and I'm going to maybe work on the computer a little bit. I'm still pretty tired, but so anyway, Tuesday, I think. Well, it was one of the days of this week. We had a bunch of primaries and like one proposition, and then like Secretary of State and state representatives and everything like that vote. And here, and then like 3 other states, I think, all had a bunch of them or whatever. And I mean, you can watch news reports or Colbert Show or whatever covering over who won where, why, blah blah blah. One thing that was interesting is that, so it was the primaries, right? It wasn't the general. So you had the people on whichever party win. And as expected, most of the primaries for the Republicans, the most wackadoo people, most election denying conspiracy theorists, Trump is our God, people won, which I find a little scary because everything is terrible and we're in the wrong timeline, and we're in the upside down where, there was already a lot of corruption and evil in the world always because humans are fucking horrible. But, basically whatever the worst outcome could be generally seems to be what happens. There were a couple of exceptions. For instance, I assume you've probably already heard this, but in case you haven't, Kansas was going to try to outlaw abortion, and the proposition was overwhelmingly shot down. I think it was 59% kept abortion rights, and then 41% went against it. And it's especially significant because the Republicans were so deceptive in this vote. Like the wording of the proposition is extremely confusing, so that you don't know exactly what a yes or no vote means. And that's true for a lot of propositions. My method for voting is usually like, so I live in a state where it's completely 100% mail-in voting. Although I almost always drop mine in a ballot box just so I minimize the chance of, DeJoy, who's still fucking head of the USPS. And my mom is probably rolling in her grave because she worked for the USPS for decades. But um, what I like to do is I get my ballot, I make sure that I don't lose it, and then I wait until like a week or maybe a couple of days before the end of before the due date, and then I look up a progressive voters guide, and then I read what it says about the people. And I still, like, I'm not 100% like, oh, well, they said that this person's the best, so I'm just going to vote for them. Like, I read up on their position or whatever like that. But and then, like, a lot of times there'll be candidates that there's nothing in the progressive voters guide, so I will try to, like, find what I can online about, like, interviews with them or whatever, try to find out what their positions are. It's frustrating when they don't say R or D, because it's usually a good starting off point. If there are, I'm not going to vote for them. But anyway, so, and the reason I like to wait until the end is because, that's like the discovery period where stuff might come out about this person that if I had voted, I'd be like, fuck, I can't believe I like gave my vote to this person. Turns out they did this terrible thing. So that's why I like to wait till up to the moment before. But I live in a state where it's extremely easy to vote. Literally, your ballot shows up at your door and you can send it back. No post is necessary. I like to do the ballot in the box, like I said, because I feel like it's more impactful. In 2020, when I voted for the president, I actually went all the way down to the voting election, like, head office or whatever, so that I had the satisfaction of putting it like in the box where they all come to. But for the most part, I just do it in a local box. I know a bunch of states, I think Pennsylvania might be one of them, they're either trying to or they already ruled that ballot boxes are legal. Like, they won't accept mail-in votes, and even if they do, like, if you don't sign, which is not supposed to be required, they'll throw out your vote. If you don't have your, driver's license, they'll throw out your vote. Like, they close all the polling places in Democratic areas and people of color places in lower income areas. Not even lower income, because, like, if it's a trailer park full of white people, then they'll give a polling location. Anyway, so many other states make it so much harder to vote. And so I have sympathy for people who are trying to vote in those areas where it's extremely difficult to, especially if you have to, like, wait in line to vote. And because they're closing all these polling places, you have to all consolidate to one where you can wait in line for 10 hours to vote. And, obviously a lot of these people have jobs where, they can't take the time off. Election day should be a national holiday. Like, it's fucking stupid that it's not. But, all these things, or like transportation, or like people not able to get a driver's license. I don't really know why you wouldn't have a driver's license already anyway, but I mean, again, a lot of people just don't have the time to go get one. But it being so easy to vote in my state, I get very frustrated at people who don't vote. I'll have these conversations with people, like in my Discord and Twitch or whatever, and like some of them are in the same state as me, and they'll be like, oh, I forgot to vote. And I'm like, how can you like talk so much about politics and have your ballot show up in the mail where literally all you have to do is set aside 10 fucking minutes, more if you want to be more informed, but set aside maybe max an hour to sit there and just read through who it is and vote, and then drop it in the mailbox right in front of your house. That's the frustration I have with, a lot of leftist voters or whatever, is that we love to complain on Twitter about the elections, but so many people just can't be bothered to vote. And, you know, they don't do anything besides complain on Twitter, you know, or repost someone on Facebook. Like all my San Diego contacts that I don't even consider friends anymore because I couldn't get, you know, except for a very small number of them, I couldn't get any of them to like reply to any of my messages. I didn't see any of them when I was down there. So yeah, they're not friends. And like, I don't talk to anyone anymore because for one thing, they refuse to use anything besides Facebook, and I refuse to use Facebook. Anyway, so yeah, so that vote happened, and it's interesting that, you know, all these far right people won their Republican primaries, and we got a fair amount of progressive people in the Democratic primaries. I think that maybe the attitude is shifting a little bit, where like basically the reason that Biden won the primary is that everyone was so afraid of Trump getting it that they were like, okay, I'm going to go with the safest choice. I'm going to go with the old white man, you know. I think there's more of a hunger now, at least among leftists, to have someone more progressive. For instance, they're theoretically about to post the Inflation Reduction Act, which is basically what the BBB was going to be. It's a much smaller amount of money. I think it's like 400 something billion instead of the like 3 trillion that Bernie wanted with the BBB and everything like that. But there are climate provisions, and it's going to be the biggest climate action bill ever passed in the US, which is not a glowing endorsement because we haven't done shit. It doesn't, you know, we're going back up to 100 something degrees this weekend. We had multiple 100-degree days last weekend, and then we had like a brief period of low 80s, and then yeah, this weekend we're going back to 100. And of course, you know, Texas is baking, all these other southern states are getting hit with flooding and all this other stuff, and yet they keep voting for people who don't do anything about climate change. But again, a lot of the people who would vote rationally are prevented from voting. It's only the, you know, white people in heavily Republican areas that have voting made more, you know, like if you're an old white retired person, just walk onto the polling booth down the street. Anyway, yeah, so they're talking about like that passing. There was worry about cinema tanking it, and I still, you know, I'll believe it when the bill actually passes. Cinema, of course, there's at least one provision that they're going to cut out because of cinema. Fucking pitch. I can't remember what it's called. It's like capital gains something. I don't know. Anyway, it's basically it's a percentage, tax percentage or whatever that is already supposed to be getting charged from these mega corporations, and it used to be even higher, and then like Trump, you know, got rid of it entirely, and they're trying to put like the lowest base amount back on. And as soon as Schumer and Manchin came out with this deal, all these giant corporations who were already donating to cinema, but they like really ratcheted up those donations, and surprise, surprise, all of a sudden cinema's like, think of the poor hedge fund managers. Oh, I hate her and Manchin so much. And there's like other people in the Democratic Party that are also fucking horrible, but Manchin and cinema really take the cake for being the worst. And it's still like, what did Schumer have to give Manchin to get him to say okay on this bill? Because Manchin's fucking terrible. Anyway, so actually what I was going to talk about, very sexy. What I was going to talk about in this video is something that's kind of an awkward, sorry, I'm sick, okay? Awkward subject to talk about, but so in the Republican Party, on the conservative side, they have this tendency to give a free pass to, they don't care how nutty you are, they don't care, you know, like look at all the Christians who support Trump even though he's, you know, everything that they claim to be against, because these people will have one thing that they claim to support, these candidates will have one thing that they claim to support, like being anti-abortion or something, and so they'll give them a pass for everything else. Whereas leftists, even if you matched 90% of what, you know, the leftist voter supports. If you have one thing that they don't like, they won't vote for you. They'll be against you. And that's why we lose so many elections, because leftists can't get our heads out of our asses. And I'm not saying that forgiving everything because you have one thing that that person, again, says that they support, except that, like, even with Trump, he used to be, you know, pro-choice. I mean, he donated to people that were pro-choice, and then all of a sudden he went full Republican. But I'm not saying that that's good, and I mean, there's obviously things that are, like, unforgivable. Like, I don't care how, you know, leftist a candidate pretends to be. If they're, like, you know, proven rapist or something, like, I'm not going to vote for them. But because of our purity politics, we constantly lose elections because we can't join together behind a single candidate. And so one of the big differences with Republicans and Democrats is that with Republicans, it's very hypocritical. Okay, so for instance, Hillary's emails, oh my God, she should be arrested for it. And yet it doesn't matter how much comes out about Trump and his kids doing exactly the same thing that they supposedly hate Hillary for. You know, like using her government email to send out, I can't remember what it was that they allegedly hate Hillary for, except that it's not actually, you know, has anything to do with it. You know, that they allegedly hate Hillary for. It doesn't matter how much Trump and his kids do the exact same thing. For them, it's okay. But for Hillary, it's bad. You know, countless other examples, like if a Democrat, you know, rapes someone, then all of a sudden, then, like, I can't believe that Democrats would vote for him. But it doesn't matter how many cases, how many people, how many, you know, allegations, whatever, a Republican candidate gets for rape. For them, it's okay. And so that's the Republican side of it. Democrats, not all Democrats, but, you know, reflecting, like with Al Franken and stuff like that, it's not a, well, for our side, it's okay. In fact, Democrats hold our own selves responsible to an infinitely higher degree than Republicans ever held theirs. Sometimes I think the degree is a little too high. And that's where I'm not a far leftist. I'm definitely not a centrist, but I think there are some cases where it's, you know, very detrimental to, you know, the whole bus analogy. Like, politics isn't like, you know, politics is like taking a bus. You pick the bus that gets the closest to your location, and then you walk the rest of the way. You don't just not take the bus, because none of them go directly to where you're going. Anyway, and so the reason that I'm thinking about this is that there's two coin flip situations right now. So one of the votes in my area was a vote for sheriff. And one of the candidates, far-right goon, who straight up said that if there are any laws that get changed as far as the Second Amendment goes, like if they, you know, restore, not even make a new ban, but restore the old ban against assault rifles, that he would refuse to, you know, he refused to carry it out. He wouldn't, you know, arrest anyone for, he wouldn't arrest a 18-year-old for walking in and buying an assault rifle after it becomes illegal again. Which, you know, even if he wasn't far right in every other regard, like, that in itself is like, oh, so you only follow the laws that you think are valid. Like, he literally was like, oh, anything that goes against the Second Amendment is unconstitutional. I love how Republicans like to say that anything they don't like is unconstitutional. And, like, they go back to their originalist interpretation of the Constitution, except that, like, even with the Second Amendment, it was well-regulated militia, and the guns that existed then did not exist now. Or the guns that exist now did not exist then, you know, the deadliness of the guns that exist now, and, like, all this other stuff. So, you know, all these very creative interpretations of what these words mean. So yeah, so that guy, he said that, and I mean, there were other things that, you know, like the guy that I did vote with or vote for. I wasn't like, oh my god, I support everything that he says, but you know, compared to this right-wing nut job, obviously the other guy was a better choice. And then the flip side is what's going on right now, where DeSantis over in Florida basically removed this other guy, I think prosecutor, I should have written down like the names and positions, but basically a high level prosecutor, whatever, that won, I think he just won a third term. He was already elected twice. Maybe he just won a second term. But anyway, DeSantis has basically removed all his power because the guy signed a letter along with 80 other, I don't know, senators, people in position, something like that. Anyway, across the country, saying that if their state, even if their states make it illegal to get an abortion, they're not going to prosecute people who get abortions or who help people get abortions or whatever. And so DeSantis decided to punish this guy by taking him, you know, removing all his power. And it's a complicated issue because if I was a Republican, I'd be like, well, if the other side does it, it's bad. But if my side does it, it's okay. And so from that perspective, you know, how could I be against the right-wing nutjob sheriff for refusing to follow, you know, any new legislation as far as, like, again, banning assault rifles or, what, you know, having red flag, whatever it is. He said if there's anything that infringes on Second Amendment rights at all, he won't follow it. Versus this guy in Florida who says that he won't, you know, persecute people for getting or aiding someone to get an abortion. On the surface, you know, you can't support one and not the other. I do think that there are nuances to this. For one, with the sheriff, it's his platform, and it's like you decide who you're going to vote for. And so in that sense, that's how he's being held to account or whatever, is that people decide while voting if refusing to follow any, you know, constitutional amendments that you don't agree with is precedent. Whereas the guy that DeSantis took all the death Santis, as some people call him, took out of power, like, the guy was already elected, and then DeSantis was like, I don't like that, I'm gonna take away all your power. There's also the fact that the outlawing of abortion, if Florida outlaws abortion, is a state thing, whereas federally it's still allowed. That's where you get the fucking far-right Supreme Court that decided to undo decades of precedent because, again, far-right theocracy, Amy Coathanger Barrett. So, and that makes me think of, like, weed, for instance. So, you know, all these states, even Republican states at this point, are like, fine, you can smoke weed, we give up. When I was younger, my parents were very straight edge, and, like, we never even really drank, certainly didn't smoke or anything like that. And my parents raised me with this belief that, like, anyone who smoked pot was, like, just a fucking huge loser. And I do know a lot of potheads that are fucking losers. I also know a lot of people who, well, to be honest, most of the people that I know that are losers smoke pot, but I don't think it's that pot makes you a loser. I think it's just that losers tend to smoke pot. But then again, like, people like my sister-in-law, she's a huge pothead, and yet she's a very hard worker. She's very smart. She does have no short-term memory at all, so that part's very true. But, you know, when she's on the job, she's a very hard worker. She was a Navy nuke, just like my husband, which I guess you have to be really smart and hardworking to survive as. And so I realized that, you know, it's not that pot causes someone to become a loser, it's that losers tend to smoke pot. They tend to drink a lot too. But yeah, so, like, on a state level, they're still saying, you know, there's a lot of states that are coming around and saying, like, fine, whatever, we don't care, smoke pot. But federally, it's still illegal. And so going back to these two guys, sorry, this is really rambling. I'm tired. I'm tired and my head is full of cotton. Anyway, basically, it's a conflicting position because on the surface, I can't say that, you know, not following the ruling if assault rifles were to be banned or something. And it's not even that specific. Again, that's the other thing, is that like this far right guy is just like anything that infringes on the Second Amendment at all. Whereas the DeSantis guy, the guy that DeSantis took power away from, specifically was signing a letter saying that they won't pursue people, again, who get or who help someone get an abortion. Like, that's a very specific thing. Yeah. So anyway, I don't know. What are your thoughts? What are your thoughts on this? Like, what qualifiers do you need, which may be true in this case, to say that, you know, it's not going to be a problem for you, one of these positions, but the other one isn't? And also, does it make a difference to you if it's like someone, you know, this is their position and you decide if you're going to vote for them or not, versus this person already won an election and then all of a sudden the guy over him just decided, I don't like what you said you're going to do. It's not even a law yet. Like, Florida has not outlawed abortion yet, but, you know, I don't like that you said you would do this thing, so I'm going to take all your power. Like, yeah. One other thing I was reading about today that kind of cracked me up is apparently there's some GOP operatives that are trying to save Liz Cheney from losing her seat by pushing Dems to vote for her, which it's like, that's the only path, if she ever does manage to stay in power, it's only going to be because Dems vote for her, because Republicans fucking hate her because she dared to go against Trump. I mean, they'll not vote for someone even for confirming that Biden actually won. There go all the Republican votes. Like, I don't know what this mythical belief in Republicans that are tired of Trump is. Like, clearly these primaries proved otherwise. Republican voters are still hugely obsessed with Trump. It is a cult. And I don't like it because obviously, you know, she's just done a great job on the January 6 hearings, but Liz Cheney is a Republican. She still votes Republican. She's still anti all these things that I care about. My understanding is she's in a very red state. So it's not like an actual Democrat would have a chance to win in her state. So I guess compared between her and far-right wackadoo and election denying Trumper, obviously we'd rather have her in charge of that position, because I don't think in any of these red states, if it's a wackadoo right-winger versus a Democrat, like, the Democrat's not going to win. So, yeah, I mean, I prefer to have her over Trumper, but I don't see that happening. So, all right, I'm gonna go take some more Dayquil and try to get something useful done, even though I feel like shit, and try not to angst out too much about the midterms, even though we're in the upside down world, everything is terrible, climate change is worse and worse, and yet we can't get people to fucking do a single thing about it. I guess it's good that the Inflation Reduction Act is supposedly going to pass, except who knows how much Cinema Mansion everyone are going to gut it, but it's something. Now the question is it going to make a fucking difference to voters in the midterms? Because, I don't know, leftists are we're constantly stabbing ourselves in the foot. Like, being like, this guy isn't perfectly exactly what I want, so I won't vote for him. Meanwhile, Republicans are like, I don't care how many other things this guy violates what I pretend to hold dear. He's anti-abortion, or he's anti, LGBTQ, or whatever, so I'm going to vote for him. And that's why Republicans win. That, plus gerrymandering, plus voter suppression, are why Republicans win so many elections. And when they lose, they say the election was rigged because non-retired white people were allowed to vote. So obviously it's rigged. Funny how the elections that they win are not rigged, but any election that they lose is rigged. Yeah. All right. Don't be an idiot. Don't vote Republican. And if you do, accept that you're in a cult. Enjoy the Kool-Aid.